iletişim alanında bu konularda uzman bir araştırmacı. Vicken Cheterian'ın yapacağı sunuş Türkiye'nin siyasi seçenekleri ve Karabakh sorununun şekillenmesi etrafında olacak. Daha önce Ulvi İsmail'in belki yapamadığı sunuştaki konuları da bu iki konuşmacı ve sorularımızla kapatmaya çalışacağız.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. Good evening. Thank you for your being here, and I would like also to thank Randik Foundation and the committee which selected my presentation. It's an honor being here. The topic of my paper is Turkish political choices and the shaping of the Karabakh conflict. What I'm trying to do here is to think whether political choices that were taken and political choices that were not taken, what kind of influence they had in the events between Armenians and Azerbaijanis between 1988 up to today. And what I will try to do is both to go through deliberate choices taken by Turkey, like the border is a very good example, what to do with the border, to open it, to close it, why, in what conditions. But there's an underlying deeper kind of communication and deeper meaning of Turkey's political choices going back to the events that took place during First World War and how Turkey positioned itself after. So I will work on these two levels. But first, let me bring you an image. I will go back to something that was mentioned earlier. I will go to Zizernagapet, which is in Yerevan. It's on a hill. It's the monument dedicated to the victims of the genocide. And the time is the month of April 24, 1992. I was there. I was walking with many people carrying flowers, going to the monument. But what struck me was just 100 meters before one reaches the monument, there were 4 new tombstones of young men who were killed fighting. In fact, they were fighting on the border with Nakhichevan. So the fact that those 4 young dead men were buried on this site, for me it was annoying. It was annoying because at the time it was communicating something. It was not by chance that they were there. And what was the message from this communication was that we are fighting now the same fight as 1915. And me, at that time, I very much opposed such a reading of the events. Me, I thought history is not necessary to repeat itself, that Azerbaijan is not Ottoman Empire, that Azerbaijani people are not the people of the other side of the border, that Azerbaijani leadership are not the Ittihadis, and that we should understand what was happening in Karabakh from a very different context, from the context of the Soviet Union, Soviet legacy, problems that emerged in the conditions of Soviet disintegration and very rapid collapse. And eventually, what was happening in Karabakh was not unique. There were a number of similar conflicts taking place. Karabakh was only one. For example, in neighboring Georgia, there was South Ossetia, which also was in conflict with central authorities. There was Abkhazia, a bit further to the north. There was the conflict between the Ingush and the Ossets, and then the bigger, very tragic conflict in Chechnya. There's the Transnistrian conflict in Moldova. There was Tajikistan in civil war. So the ethnic clashes in southern Kyrgyzstan, Fergana Valley between Uzbeks and Kyrgyz, and so on. So me, I very kind of strongly opposed at the time to superpose the the present, because I was also hoping that the future would be different from the past. That although there are political divergences, difficulties, that people will not necessarily find solutions in violence. Now, in case someone asked me today, was I right? I would probably say that I was wrong, that my hopes were not very correct at the time, and that there's stronger continuity between the past and the present than I hoped at the time, or at the time I thought I was analyzing, so it was more pretentious. And more interesting, my observation today is that the past 1915 genocide is not being linked to the present by the Armenians, which one would suppose, right? But by, surprisingly, Azerbaijan. And I will come back to that. So, the Karabakh conflict was initially a political issue. In February 20, 1988, the local Soviet of Karabakh voted to bring Karabakh to be part of Soviet Armenia at the time. And just 1 week later, there's a violence, very major violence erupting over 2 days and a half, 3 days in Sumgait, far away from Karabakh, where anti-Armenian pogroms are taking place. So in a very short period of time, we moved from a conflict which was in its nature political, and it could have stayed political. Because in the Caucasus in the next few years, we had over 30 up to 35 territorial divergences, and only 5 violent conflicts. So it was not necessary that an issue which is of political nature immediately comes into violence. But the very rapid violence that took place later already changed the nature of the struggle. And what happened in Sumgait, for me, it's a kind of communication, it's a kind of reminder, it's a kind of a message and a communication between two sides, where in the past there has been similar violence regulating the relations, and when once again we have times of trouble, times of uncertainty, times of political negotiations to determine the new regimes that are emerging, this reminder is coming back, saying, in case you ask more than what you deserve, your fate will be like in the past. So the violence exercise is not simply taking place in the content of the current relations, but the memory of violence remains in communities, on both sides of communities, and it re-emerges in a very strong way when there are times of uncertainty which generate fear and anxiety.